Welcome back to the channel. Today I have a very special guest joining us, Jason Pizzino, who's going to be giving us a look through the crypto markets. We're going to look at Bitcoin, where we are in the cycle, and what to expect for the next few months. When is the Bitcoin top? Is the top already in? Jason's price targets, thoughts on altcoins, and a lot more. Jason, welcome back to the channel, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. G'day to everyone.
I just took a look at the S&P 500 futures. We can see they're actually down at the moment, and I think this is the lowest they've been since November 5th. So clearly a lot of fear in the market at the moment. How are you feeling right now about the current sentiment?
I mean, yeah, it's down. There's fear there. I think it's even hit extreme fear. In terms of the price, I'm feeling fine because we haven't broken down from any key structure. Macro is still in play. The cycle is still up. And this to me is what I'm waiting for in terms of a new anchor point for the market. Basically like where you could measure from. So measure a new low from. I don't know when that low is going to come in. I don't know exactly what price it's going to be, but I think we're in the process of finding out when that is. Whereas from what I can understand from a lot of the market, they think that the top might already be in. I don't think we're there yet. Right now, we're basically retraced almost all of that Trump pump. You can see there on my chart there, the S&P 500, and that current red bar that's on the screen there is basically into that gap from when the election was. So there's Tuesday. I can just draw on the screen here. That's Tuesday, and that's Wednesday from the election. So you can see from the price point here, it's basically into that gap. So everything that people were hyped up on and what Trump's going to do and this and that from the election, well, it's basically come right back to that area. So potentially, you never know for sure. Obviously, no one has a crystal ball, but you can see that that has basically worn off from the market, and we're potentially resetting the sentiment, which I think is a good thing longer term for the market. So there might be some short-term pain, and my next target for the short-term pain is somewhere around 5,600 to 5,700. You might be wondering, what the hell does that matter if you're trying to trade altcoins and Bitcoin and get a little bit degenerate about the game? But if this is on the way down, not impossible, but as I say, it's unlikely that we're going to see anything really take off for altcoins and BTC in the meantime.
I think a lot of the panic right now is clearly being driven by macro. It seems like everyone's talking about macro again, CPI, what Jerome Powell's going to do, what Trump's response is going to be in terms of interest rates and tariffs. How do you view that? Do you think that really matters in terms of where we're headed? And can that maybe explain why we've gotten the pullback?
I mean, anything can explain the pullback, but that's typically what happens if you've been following the news cycles. It's like the pullback happens, and then they try to explain it based on stuff that's already happened. And I think people it's human nature, right? We want to find out why. And then we think that by finding out why, we can prevent the issue next time. But typically next time, the same why doesn't play out exactly the same way. So people then go to, well, this time is different. It's like, no, that's not how it works. Because if everyone did the same thing with the same response, then you'd get an even worse result. So it's like the interest rates, right? Interest rates, they look like they're not coming down now. So this might be part of the macro thesis at play with the narrative. But it might just be the market resetting from having already priced in that there were going to be more interest rate cuts, and now they're not. And it's just maybe just a balancing act. But then you can see from the technicals that the trend was down. The top has been in now for several weeks. And there are some pretty clear levels to the downside at 5,600. The orange line there is your 200-day moving average. That's at around 55.72. So on the next few days, it's probably going to climb up close to 5,600 as well. And then in terms of an anchor point, you've got August low here. This is that Japanese yen carry trade that basically freaked out the market. Everyone called for a new recession on that day. And well, lo and behold, it marked the low, as it typically does. And that was our anchor point to work from now. So I think we're in the midst of forming another anchor point.
So is your obviously everything's a probability in crypto. There's no absolutes. Sure. Do you think probabilistically we are going to go to 5,600 or potentially lower on the S&P?
Potentially because the trends are still down. You can see my little red squares at the top here, just using a swing indicator, and lower highs, lower lows suggest further downside, right? It sounds pretty damn simple, but why make it more complicated than it is? The 1 day is down, the 1 day 2 bar, sorry, the 1 week is down. So just keep following the trend. So it's not a bad thing to have a correction in a market. It's actually super, super healthy, especially when it looks like it's going to be a balanced correction. And at the moment, it's in the form of that. Balancing meaning, we're coming back down to sort of halfway points. We're not breaking key turning points in the market. So just let it do its thing.
I'd love to have a look at your Bitcoin chart as it relates to the S&P. Obviously, they're quite correlated in terms of risk, but what are you seeing on Bitcoin specifically? Because it ran up way more aggressively than the S&P.
It did. So it seems like there's more strength in Bitcoin longer term, but if we're seeing the, say, S&P come back to fill in that gap of the Trump pump or the election pump, whatever people want to call it, right? It's basically from the election, everything ran up pretty hard. The S&P's done that. The NASDAQ is not at the gap yet, but there's the gap there. It did it in November, 1 or 2 weeks after the election, but it potentially is on the way back down. You can see lower highs, lower lows as well. The Dow Jones has been down for several days there. It's actually filled in that gap. Your Russell 2000, so the lowest, or the bottom 2000 stocks, the small caps. You guys love trading altcoins, same sort of thing here. That's also filled in the pump Trump, coming back to test the 200-week moving average. I mean, I could go down a number of charts. They're on a correction. Why would I think that Bitcoin wouldn't be on that path as well? It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just part of a correction, and it doesn't necessarily seem like it's not out of the craziness that it shouldn't do that, especially after such a significant move to the upside.
So my personal belief is that if we do get a correction on Bitcoin, it's likely going to happen over the next few weeks. Like, let's say, we do go to the 80s. My belief is that would likely be triggered by some sort of FOMC/CPI debacle or something within the first weeks or days of the Trump presidency. And seasonality suggests that February and March are typically better months. If you look historically for Ethereum and Bitcoin, January actually does have every 4 years these corrections. So are you similar in that thinking that if this downtrend is to extend, it's probably going to happen sooner rather than later? Or do you have a differing opinion there?
It's always hard because people work off different timeframes and they have different the length of their attention as well. So this is just the daily on Bitcoin. I guess, look, to answer your question, and then I'll get into why. I think in the short term, there is the possibility that very short term, we come up and test some of those higher prices. Maybe that's already occurred today. This is Monday here. It's come up, run up to 95,800. I'm on the Bitstamp, roughly all the same, right? 95,800. And maybe that's the short term. Much further, I could see it going to sort of 100K, because that's where those previous levels were. And that's in the short term. But in the longer term, I think, it doesn't necessarily have to happen over the next few weeks. But it seems like it could be in that time frame to do that because of the extent of time that we've been down from this all-time high already. So it's been 23 days to the current low and 27 days to today's current date underneath the old all-time high. And I often refer to that on the channel, especially after we've seen significant signals at play that basically let you know about the strength and the weakness of the market to try and make it as simple as possible.
I think it would be valuable for people to have more perspective on the macro cycle for Bitcoin. So how are you currently viewing where we are in the cycle? I spoke to you a bit off camera earlier and you said, we've essentially been long, and you specifically, I know, because you were joining my Twitter spaces back in 2022. So you've been long since then, like pretty much the bottom. I got to say, you're one of the guys that called it pretty much spot on, much better than other analysts. Like, I genuinely mean that. And, that's one of the reasons why I respect your opinion. But obviously that means you've been long for over 2 years now. So I'm just wondering how you're viewing the time frame on Bitcoin. I know there's a lot of discussion that Bitcoin's topped. Ansem had that very controversial tweet about Bitcoin 75% being topped. What's your number that, in terms of if Bitcoin's topped, and if we haven't seen a top, when are you expecting that to happen?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, firstly, for following along and, the kind words. I will preface that with, I've found my rhythm with getting into lows much, much easier than trying to get out at tops. So I'm not foolproof to anything, but I find lows way easier to be buying. And I think that might be my edge when it comes to the market, because at lows, people just get way more fearful than they need to. And like we saw at those bottoms, most people left the market, even though you could tell them black and blue every single video, and you probably could see that on my channel. Stay with the market. Don't leave when things get boring. Don't switch off because there's nothing going on. And, I can come back in a few weeks and everything will be all right. When you miss out on learning from the market over those few weeks, you basically miss out on time that you can't get back. And that's pretty much what the majority of people do. So if you want the same results that the majority of people get, do what they do. Only enter crypto when there's something exciting going on and headlines, and leave when there's not really much going on. Do the opposite. And that comes down to your attention as well. So yeah, that's pretty much those lows. The highs, look, longer term, I think there's still further to go on the upside, based purely on my macro thesis, which is that there is still longer to go in the real estate and economic cycle. And I suspect we're still going to see further upside in the stock markets as well. Therefore, I think we still have a further to go for BTC. Oh, you've got the chart there. Fantastic. But just let me add one quick thing on that, is that I don't expect Bitcoin to top at the same time as real estate or the economy or the stock markets. I suspect, and Bitcoin has not been through a full 18-year cycle yet, but I suspect Bitcoin and cryptos will top before the rest of the markets. They'll top before the stock markets, potentially even the real estate and economic cycle as well, which is what you see here. So you were asking the question before, how much longer do I think there is to go? I think that was roughly around the question.
Yeah.
I'm looking sometime in 2025. I know most people are saying the same thing. So I think it's going to be a tricky one nonetheless. And as I said, I think lows are way easier. Therefore, remain with an investment if you are looking to make this a long-term play. I know it sounds boring, but look, that's worked for me, and that's all I can share with you.
I think what most people, and I think we'll speak about altcoins in more depth slightly later in the video after we finish our Bitcoin discussion, but judging by the sentiment, it seems like most people, all they really want is one more big push to the upside on Bitcoin and alts. They just want that big blow off. Do you think that's happening? Do you think at some point this year we're going to get that big blow off, or do you think things will be a little more muted?
Man, I honestly don't know. It's a hard one, right? I don't know. I don't want to be giving too much hopium out there and people losing their minds and their wallets and all this sort of stuff. I think there is still further upside to go. Whether it's this huge blow off top that everyone's waiting for from 2021 and even bigger in 27 that we had in 2017, I don't think they're going to experience the same feeling. I think it's like, I know you're in Dubai, so I can't make those comments about grabbing that feeling. You're at a nightclub and anyway, moving on from that. It doesn't happen the same way. It doesn't happen the same way every time. And everyone keeps trying to chase that same hit. There's probably a better way there. And the same hit, I don't think hits the way it did in the past. That was what I felt in 2021. And I got caught out there. I was thinking, there's got to be more to this, but it wasn't. But everyone who had joined in 2021 thought it was absolutely amazing. And yeah, there were some altcoins that went absolutely ballistic. But for the majority of it, it was pretty hard to find them. And I think this cycle is getting even more difficult to find those ones. And I've found with several altcoins, some of them look like they're in distribution patterns at the moment, as opposed to accumulating for another big pump up. That's not to say that some of the altcoins won't make it. And I think you're on to the next narrative all the time, finding out, I think what's next, like, AI agents or something like that. Right. But it's shifting a lot quicker because everyone's waiting for this big pump, and the big pump's already happened and they're waiting for it to happen again, and it doesn't. And then the next narrative comes along.
You know what the problem is? There's just so much altcoin dilution this cycle Like there are so many new launches. And even if you look at the AI agent sector, for example, like you had Goat, which kicked it off, and that was the obvious player at the time. Then you had FARTCOIN and Genon, which kind of started to run. Then you had AI16Z and AIXBT run. Now you have DeFi AI running. So that's just one narrative from October. And in the space of 3 months, you've had the leader become the lagger, and then a new leader, and then a new leader. And in that period, RWA had a huge run and then cooled off. LLMs, AI tech had a huge run, then cooled off. The normie coins, XRP, IOTA, etc., they had a run and then cooled off. So you're seeing these like really fast rotations, almost like these like mini cycles within a within a bigger cycle. So I think the reason why I don't think we are going to get a blow off top on every single altcoin. I think there'll be certain sectors which outperform. I think the reason why fundamentally we don't get that like we did in 2021 is because there's just so much more dilution now. I think the amount of tokens that have launched, and obviously this data is being skewed by pump fun and the ease of launching new coins with agents, etc. But it's over 100x to 1000x since last cycle. Previously, you needed a smart contract dev. Actually, that number's probably off because that was based on last year. Now you have agents deploying millions of tokens a day. So that number's probably a lot higher than that because you need a smart contract dev last cycle that you need to pay money to. Now you can just go into Pump Fun, launch coins, spin up a website. Haha, we're an AI narrative. Let's do a bunch of marketing, get a bunch of hype. And the hype cycles are just running rampant.
Faster and faster. So like, how do you win at that game? I honestly don't know. So I just look for stuff that already has a history. But I guess that's where your, expertise comes in because you can sit behind.
Crypto's all about an edge. You said before, your edge is probably your ability to remain unemotional during times of turbulence and actually position for the longer term. My edge in this market has been, the ability to spot narratives and hit those rotations. But you need to kind of find it yourself. And I think there's a balance. Like people could theoretically implement your strategy and my strategy balanced, maybe take some of the narratives that are going to be around longer term, position in those leaders and follow the general cycle theory, and you can probably still make money. So you don't need to over rotate, but if you are in a position where you have time and you have an edge, then you can probably over rotate and make money. But I have this tweet on the screen because I think it's an interesting framework that I wanted your thoughts on. DocXBT, who's one of the traders in the Mars High Club, he says that if you change your mindset from the 1 year for the 1 4-year cycle, into multiple mini risk-on cycles, you'll probably be happier and perform better because your time frames would change. I think he's mostly referencing altcoins here, but what do you make of that mindset shift?
I think if you are looking at that for altcoins for this cycle, it makes more sense because there have been many risk-on cycles within altcoins. Basically, I guess you would look at it in terms of narratives, like multiple mini narratives, like 2020 and 2021, it seemed like there was only a handful. And I can distinctly remember there was like DeFi and then it rolled into everything else,
NFTs and Metaverse, they were the three.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then DeFi didn't work as well. And this cycle, we saw like RWA and AI early on. I remember Injective was mental and Injective really hasn't done anything. And at the time I called Injective like maybe the Link of this cycle because Link went ballistic in 2020. And really didn't give you that same sort of Bitcoin return. Look, it might all come full circle again because of how fast things are playing out. So that's the difficulty when there's more cryptos and more people trying to make money from it.
Yeah, 100%. I like this quote. I was just reading through the comments. Mercury has this quote: people overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years. Small wins compounded consistently is the way. So I think when it comes to altcoins, this is how you have to view it. Keep compounding small wins, keep taking your wins, and probably funnel back into Bitcoin during the bear markets. That's kind of the strategy.
Some of the things I do with my altcoins, like I think I'm remembering this because it happened just over the weekend, right? One of them, I sell the majority of, well, not the majority actually. I sell enough to pay down the risk, meaning how much capital I put down. And now I can just let the altcoin do whatever it does. Like, I don't care if the altcoin goes down 50% because I'm at zero. I'm at, there's no risk in it for me anymore. So people can do that. But I think everyone just sort of, they freak out and they just want to keep holding on for the longest ride possible. There's nothing wrong with just taking the small wins. There's nothing wrong with making it boring if you're going to make money. It's not exciting, and that's the way it should be, in my opinion. The way I've seen it work, especially.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of this completely, but I think a lot of people, because I see it every day in the comments on Twitter, in Discord, everyone they have these targets. They want a 5x or 10x. So they go into the bull run of like, okay, I need to 10x my portfolio. So obviously, if you have that outcome attached to your identity, or your judgment on your self-success is based on that outcome, then you have to take on a lot of risk to achieve that outcome. And obviously you're going to feel quite bad if you don't. And I feel like part of the reason why sentiment's so bad at the moment is because a lot of people have had these numbers. I can 5x, I can 10x. That's my target. And now they're starting to come to terms, or maybe just consider the possibility, because they still might, right? But they're considering, oh, maybe I'm going to fail again this cycle and not 5 to 10x. Do you think maybe expectations are too high, or do you think it's more of a mindset thing?
Yes. I think expectations are way too high, because you're basically playing a game that you've never played before to try and make returns that you've never made before. It just doesn't make sense. So it's like, why make life more difficult for yourself? And I'm the boring old guy in this, like, call me a boomer or whatever it is, right? But like, you don't expect to do that in any other area in life except gambling.
Which is what altcoins are, essentially. And
yeah, I mean, people turn it into gambling for sure.
Yeah.
Like you said, a lot of people, a lot of us were up just a few months ago. And now from that point, didn't sell, back down. Like, if it really means that much to you, if it means life and death, get out. Like, what the hell are you doing? Like, why ride the thing back down?
Just before the video, we were talking, I think this is a relevant point to insert this, about thinking of gains in terms of time instead of money.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a general human time.
Like hours of your life.
So if you have a monthly salary of $5,000 and you've invested $5,000 in the market and you lose 5,000, you probably feel okay, because you know, okay, in 30 days, I'm going to make this back. I only lost 30 days. Whereas if you've invested 6 months of salary, 30,000, and you lose 30K, you're going to feel a lot worse, because that's 6 months, and that's very daunting. Like, I'm going to have to work from January until July to make this money back. So I think in terms of sizing risk in the market, when you're exposing yourself to altcoins, having that framework of, I'm going to think about this in terms of how long it takes me to make back, that I think helps the psychology of how you actually trade and how maybe fearful you get during drawdowns as well.
Guaranteed. And sometimes I've even gone too small on them, where it's like, it just doesn't even matter. So you got to find that balance. It needs to matter enough for you to pay attention.
Yeah, it's got to matter enough, but not matter so much that it's
you
going to
can't
make
sleep
you broke.
and you're freaking out and you're just having a go at everything and everyone. It's everyone else's fault. No, at the end of the day, it's our own fault.
I want to highlight this tweet because now we're on the topic of altcoins. I'd love your opinion on dominance. Basically, Doc is calling this. Now, I haven't gotten his full thoughts on where he thinks it's going from now, but he's calling the Bitcoin dominance move just a fake out. It kind of looks like it if you actually look at the technicals here. Do you pay attention to Bitcoin dominance as a chart? And is there a trend that you're seeing? Because one of my predictions, candidly, earlier in the year was, I thought dominance for the cycle, or at least for the first half of the year, had probably topped. This last couple of weeks of price action is making things look a little bit more dubious. It kind of looks more like a fake out than a top for dominance now. So I'd love your...
Are you saying a fake out to the downside or to the upside?
Yeah, it looks like a bull trap on dominance to me.
Right. I don't necessarily follow the dominance chart as much.
Even though my prediction is dominance is topped. So I hope I'm still right, but I'm just looking at this tweet and by Doc, which is stirring people up in the comments. So I wanted your opinion on it.
This fake breakdown of Bitcoin dominance, in my opinion, is the most evil shit that's happened this cycle. Yeah, look, right now, you have lower highs and higher lows. So there's no decisive action yet. But it could be, it could be either. There's just not enough information yet. Once you get a breakout above roughly 60%, exactly, or below that level there, probably 54, 55, that's where your answer will come. But I don't think there's any point in trying to play it now, because there's not enough information yet. But I follow the USDT dominance a lot more, and the USDT dominance is showing signs that it looks like it wants to go higher, which is not good for Bitcoin and cryptos. So let me just take a little bit of this off so you can see. Here is a weekly chart just to take out some of the other noise. So far, we've had a low come in at about 3.8%. So USDT dominance, if people don't know, it's basically, well, USDT and how much dominance USDT has. If there's more dominance, therefore you would expect there to be less money in Bitcoin and cryptos. And if there's less dominance, you would expect there to be more money in Bitcoin and cryptos. It's just coming out of the dominance. So at the moment, well, we've been tracking this for a while now, especially when it broke down in October. And then once it got into November and hit these lows at about 3.8, 3.9%, I really started to pay more attention because it was starting to form a similar pattern to what happened back in 2021. You see on my chart here?
Yep.
Yeah. So you got this, sort of bounce, heavy volume coming in, and again, heavy volume coming in to the dump, and then a pause. So basically something was holding up the market, and it's putting in higher lows with higher highs at the moment. However, it still hasn't broken out of this trading range. So that's the difficulty right now. There's no clear direction. I think that's what's happening in the market. People are unsure of which direction the market's going, and that's obviously represented in the charts. So until you get a breakout or breakdown, it's going to be more of the same, more of the uncertainty until we get a clearer direction. And I don't think there's that long to go in it. And even if this does head up and the rest of the market goes down, you've still got resistance levels above. So I'm looking at 4.6 to 4.8% on the USDT dominance. And that could obviously lead to that final flush out, if you want to call it that, for Bitcoin and cryptos.
What's your altcoin strategy right now? Like, are you trading the alts? Are you when would you position in them? Just on a personal basis.
I'm not playing them as much as I did last cycle. I'm playing a lot more like Bitcoin and ETH and holding those positions. So overall, I'm not the best person, I would say, to speak to, especially when you're so focused on the altcoins. But I'm very heavily focused on the macro picture, the longer term. And in terms of where I would go with alts, I would look at it more so from a place of energy, and that's different to others. A lot of people want to buy the dip, and it's hard to buy the dip because you're having to buy on a lot of fear, but then also watching it as it rounds a bottom. You never know where that dip ends, right? So I just like to play it when there is energy in the market and it's going up. And so just following that trend, because with alts, if things get going, well, then you can get a pretty long trend. And that's, to me, what I found to be a better way to look at the markets for the altcoins, that is. For Bitcoin, yeah, I think it's got the staying power. So I'm happy to go in at those lows.
I had this tweet that I actually drafted. It's scheduled for today that Follis did a video on, basically about with altcoins, instead of always trying to bottom time, wait for the initial pump. So that's sign of strength versus the market. Then wait for them to consolidate, and how they react during that dip will give you a good indication as to whether it's likely going to continue. So instead of trying to catch a knife, essentially, just wait for an uptrend on alts.
Yeah, it's essentially like a Wyckoff schematic. Yeah, it's like a Wyckoff accumulation. You're waiting for that, and then you're looking for strength and weakness. If they put in higher lows, they're strong. If they put in lower lows, they're weak. I mean, we could always bring up XRP. That's what XRP did for years. It finally had its pump. And you get, well, personally, I was bagging on XRP forever. But when you look at it in terms of returns, it's only done the same thing that Bitcoin's done. So what's the difference? Did 500%. I did 500% on Bitcoin, or you could do 500% in a few weeks on XRP. But the chances are far lower because of how quick. You have to be watching that thing like every single day of your life for the chance of a 4-week move,
And that's where the concept of risk-adjusted returns come in, which is very common in the stock market, but people don't really think about as much in crypto. Like, your actual returns, sure, cool, you made the same amount of money on XRP, but that was a bad EV decision because you could have held Bitcoin, which had a much lower risk profile and offered you the same return. So I think if you're going to play alts, play altcoins that have significantly more upside than Bitcoin. So the risk-adjusted return is the same, if not better, than holding Bitcoin, because if it's worse, you shouldn't be in that altcoin. It makes no sense.
Exactly. Sometimes all this stuff falls on deaf ears, but that's okay. That's just part of the cycle and part of the game. It depends how long you're going to be here. If you're in it for 4 weeks and you made 400%, congratulations. Take the wins, get the hell out of here and go and live your life. Don't waste your time.
I think the number one thing that I want to say on alts, and I think this concept kind of summarizes it all, is just be ruthless. And even I look in December, I wasn't as ruthless as I should have been. I was a little bit complacent. Yes, I took a lot of profits and I made money, but I didn't take as much as I should have. So I think if you can be ruthless with your altcoin positioning, so when they pump, just take a lot of profits, just try and be a lot less emotional and be a bit more robotic. And just
don't even worry if they
okay.
start coming down. I always look at it like, even if it comes down, it's gone up a lot. Hopefully you got in at the right points, and just get out when you see significant
weakness
turns. Yeah, exactly. Weakness or significant turns in the trend that break.
So are you seeing that on alts? I'd be interested to get your opinion. Like, are you seeing that shift on alts right now? Like, how are you?
I'd seen it on a few, and not to take up too much time. Look, I think maybe one of these, like, that doesn't look the greatest when you got double top happening. Yeah, dog with hat here, and it's memes. Like, memes are supposed to be doing 100x. Everyone's gone on and on about them, but that might be part of the problem. On top of that, there might be a lot of them that have seen their day. They'll still pump. Everyone always forgets that little piece. They'll still pump, but they might not pump as well as something else. So just an example here. Look, this is still early days. It's January. It could still break down and still do very, very well. But you got like a double top forming, still coming down on some volume at the moment. Hasn't found a base yet. It could
pick like the weakest example, because memes are the worst performing sector right now. Yeah.
They are? Well, there you go.
Yeah. I'd love to see you just called it. I'd love to see Solana or Sui, because I think these are like market leaders.
I'll have a look at those. Yeah, I'll definitely bring that out. MOG, everyone's been banging on about it. This is sort of what people get really excited for. It's like, oh, I got in on this dip and they ride this and then they've ridden it back down. And really, that's kind of a weak move. 1,800 to 36 and a little bit more, so doubled, and it's come back down, broken 50% levels, which is pretty weak. So it's going to probably test the next lows. So I suspect there's further for it to go. Sui, that was one that I exited out of. Not all, but I'm risk-free here. Just there's a few weak patterns on that, like tops that then break back under previous old all-time highs. It's not a great sign when that happens. Look at this one here. That held on it and then kept going. But this one closed underneath. This is on a weekly chart too, so relatively long time frame when it comes to crypto. And it can still push a bit higher, like it just did in the last couple of weeks. But I'm not really sort of holding and hoping for 493 to 530 and taking that risk. Like, I'm okay with just seeing the signal and just getting out. So this is on the daily here. It went above the all-time high, came back underneath, and at the moment, it's put in a lower top. And, as we're filming this, actually, it's moving a little faster than you would like. So, yeah, anyway, maybe it's coming back to test like 440 and take off. Who knows? But, yeah, that's what I'm seeing at the moment here. Sol, also looking a little bit weak. It's got room to move to the downside. What am I on crypto? Let me get the other chart out here. It's got room to move here to 178. That's a 50% level of the weekly swing. So high to low to project it off here. So that's okay. It could find some support around 175, 178. But even further to the downside, it could still go to 136 and still be in the strong half of the 50%. And that's of the macro move here. So this is the cycle low to the cycle top, which is also an all-time high. If it comes back to the 50% at around 130s, it's still a balanced correction. It's just cryptos swing pretty hard.
Yeah, I think the issue is if Sol goes to 130, anyone that's holding Solana alts, which are on an even higher beta to Sol, essentially leverage bets, they're going to go down more than Sol. What's that, like a 25% move? They're going to go down 50, 60%, and there's going to be a lot of fear.
Yeah, you're right. About a 25, 26% move. But that might be what it takes to really flush it out, because we were looking at the fear and greed index for BTC, and we haven't really, just according to the history, it doesn't have to always work out exactly the same, but when you see it happen time and time again, the fear and greed really hasn't done enough to reset here. So you can see we've spiked down. The yellow is neutral. You guys should all be familiar with this chart. You've got extreme fear in the red, fear in orange, and then extreme greed in greed, right? And so every time we've seen in the past here, when it spends some time in extreme greed, it always resets to at least neutral, but most often I think it was only one time where it only did neutral, which is the yellow, but every other time it resets into fear. And once it hits fear, it can generally stay there for a little while longer before it's ready to come back up. So that's the last time in this cycle it did it. Extreme greed, so looking for dark green into orange, dark green, orange and red. That was at the top of the cycle. Dark green into orange, dark green, orange, dark green, orange, dark green, orange and red this time. That's pretty much the extent of the history on the Fear and Greed Index. So right now we've hit dark green, but we haven't hit orange yet.
And I guess if you think that the top probabilistically isn't in for Bitcoin, like you said earlier, then that may be a good opportunity to play that last leg of the cycle.
Yeah.
If we go there soon.
Yes. I say yes, but there's always, an asterisk attached to it because just because it hits orange doesn't mean it's the lowest price. You can see here in May 1st, it hit 56, 57, which is still a fantastic price. But when you're living through the next 2 months and July hits 53, you think you're an idiot, or you think the people who are talking about that as being a good buying opportunity are idiots and you don't trust it. You either sell out or you just give up or you get really pissed off and just stop watching. And then you see it again, like wreck people into extreme fear at 49 just for a second, but pretty much under 55. I saw it as all good buying opportunities underneath $58,000 to $60,000. Because when you look at the line at 60K, there's really not that much time in it. In that whole 8 months, underneath 60K, in terms of a percentage of time, it wasn't that much. So the market kept getting bought up between 50 and 60K. Higher lows started to form, and then you get this pump. So if we see something like that happen, you'll see some lows. People will get extremely fearful at them, probably give up or hate, just ridicule will come about, and then we'll start to potentially form a base, maybe in a V-shaped recovery from there. Who knows?
This is kind of giving me 2021 vibes where the market had that first run. Then everyone thought the bull market was over, got really, really bearish, only to see alts and Bitcoin peak again later in the year. Do you think that's something that could happen this cycle?
I mean, look, again, anything's a possibility. I don't know if we're in the same sort of feel as the first half of
that was really bad.
21.
I remember that was terrible when Bitcoin went from like 60 back to 29, was it, or 30? That was like, that really shook people.
Big time, because it happened so quick as well. And then it just dragged on for another 2 months and then finally get this nice big higher low form. Like you can see the volume come back. It just pumped for several days straight. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days before you got a swing in it, which is a pretty strong sign. And then it started to move again. So
it was brutal. Because everyone thought that it was a fake out. If you kind of cover up half of your screen, I'm doing it with my hand now, just myself. If you cover it up like that, if you're looking at that, you're like, well, the bull market's over, right? You're like,
it's like a bear trap.
We're cooked. It's sell everything because that's a bear trap. And then it only went. So this is why markets are so hard to predict, right? Because you look at something like this objectively, and you'd say that's a bear trap, right?
Not there. I was getting a little bit caught up here. I remember specifically on these dates, I saw them coming down, increasing volume as it started to push lower. But then when this date happened, I had to flip. So I was bearish on the 20th, bullish on the 21st. So I see a big reversal, took out 3 tops, higher volume than all those days. And then the next nail in the coffin for the bulls was inside day shit house. But the next day was up, next day up day, next day up day. I assume you mean
the bears, nail in the coffin for the bears.
Oh, nail in the coffin for the bears, and another target for the bulls to hit. They got another signal to say the bulls are back, but very early days, because you're getting these strong moves to the upside. That's part of like one of the rules that Michael and I have used to his whole bull market, is that 3-day rule. And there at the low, you basically had 3 days from a very significant low, turned, bam. Then you've got in this higher low, and it started to move from that point. Took out into a double top. You can see these other tops forming here, and then it started to move even higher. But that's ancient history. People want to know, like, what's going on now? What's going to happen next? And I guess, I'll look for similar patterns, look for similar times, look for similar sentiment resets, and see whether we get a similar sort of outcome,
I think the lesson there is always being adaptive and as you said, like there was a period of 3 days where you really had to be watching the markets. So like a lot of the time,
Mhm.
like we have high time frame biases. Like me and you probably both think the bull market has more room in it. And that means there's more money to be made. But there is obviously short-term things which happen. And this is where people sometimes get confused between short-term and long-term bias. They might say, oh, you're flip-flopping on your bias, which may still be long for the whole cycle, but you can be bearish for a week or 3 days based on the price action, and you can flip bullish again based on short-term bias. And that might not change your positioning. You might not sell your entire portfolio, but you might be a bit cautious on those, during that period. You might hold more stables. You might hedge short. That's another strategy, depending on if you're in illiquid alts, for example. A lot of alts I hold are on-chain, so I need to hedge short as a way to have, easy short exposure to the market versus just dumping all my altcoins, so that there are all these sort of things you can do to play the short term more aggressively or more conservatively without changing your high time frame bias.
Exactly. Like my high time frame bias would be a bit shakier. I mean, I'd be a little bit more concerned if 78K breaks down between that 74 and 78K. So that's just basically these tops, 74, and 78 is this current 50% level. That's where I get a little bit more concerned. Now, there's a couple of other things in there which go in a little bit more technical. I'll be looking at like an overbalance in time and price, which has been a big one for Michael and I to call this particular run out of the low. There was an overbalance in time and price there in September, which means more buyers, more sellers to an upside, even though the market thought it was still bearish. If I saw that from the top, that's where I'd start to get quite concerned that maybe this has run its course, but that signal hasn't come up yet. So there's a couple of things, a few others, but we can cross those bridges if and when if it ever gets to that point.
So pretty much no top signals yet.
There are some, but they're still short term. They haven't broken the macro yet.
Yeah. And I guess that's also the issue with altcoins in a way. By the time we've confirmed a top to the best of our abilities, alts are already down 60%, if not more.
Yeah, it's very possible. That's why I think it's good to take some profits on the way up. And worst case scenario, which it's happened to me multiple times, break a 50% level. So Solana in the last cycle dropped past the 50%. So the top was 260. The low was 50 cents. So, right through the middle was $130. There it is. I sold when it broke down. You can see the speed that happened once it broke that level. Look at that, $130. Bam, just dumped straight to 80. So I sold it around 130. I was so surprised of the ridicule I got for selling because everyone's sort of still holding and hoping. But at the end of the day, it went to $8. That's what happens. A 50% level is a pretty big saving grace, I think.
And just so people can do it on their own charts, is that 50% from the prior high or is it from the low? How do you calculate that?
Well, for the macro time frame, you do it from the cycle low.
Yeah.
And then the cycle top. So really simple there. And you can see it came in at about 133. Binance was slightly different. Some of the other charts were 260, but you get the idea. Yeah.
But I guess that's only applicable for alts that were around last cycle. Like for an AI16Z, like a new AI altcoin, you can't really use this technique, right?
Well, you can, but because maybe the cycle top hasn't come in yet, they can still break 50% and then move higher. But from this point, the cycle had already been running for so long. Like we know from Bitcoin, it ran into November. The low was December 2018. So it had already been going for close to 3 years. Therefore, it's probably more likely that you've experienced a top than just a local top. So you take the risk, get out. If it comes back, you'll see it in the swings, and you just have to buy it at a higher price. But it's better than watching it run to $8.
Could you maybe chart AI16Z? The reason I'm asking for this one specifically is because it's kind of like the AI leader right now, and obviously AI is a sector. Yeah, Binance OKX. I think XC might have more history, but it's like yeah, exactly. Like that's the reason why. I mean, some of the other listings were earlier. If you want to use maybe a lesser known exchange, I think Binance just listed. But the reason I'm asking is because it's like indicative of the AI run. It's like a leader. So I think looking at these kind of coins can give you an idea of like that.
Yeah.
method.
Well, look, it's so short term at the moment. You just hit 1 month of data, but this looks like it might be an early accumulation of several days, a pump, a complacency top. You know, if you throw on your Wall Street cheat sheet, that's like a clear complacency top. And if you go back and have a look what people were writing on X about it on the 6th and 7th and potentially even 8th, probably would have been around complacency. And then you get the dump from this point. Volume picked up, keeps them out. But saving grace at the moment is still above that level. That level is like, what, 90, 95 cents? It can still break down from there and be strong later on. These are
for me,
it's
a DCA level. Like personally, I've been slowly averaging in, but I am aware that it could break down and go further. So I'm open to it. But as a leading AI proxy,
60% down. Like you'd expect these to do, they could do 70, 80% and then still come back and do a 10x, 20x.
With a coin like this, would you wait? And this is, I guess, alluding to the point I made before using Follis's video. Would you wait for a confirmed reversal and then get in on an uptrend? So would you just wait, or is your strategy, if you were buying this hypothetically, to average in on the way down?
I'd probably look for a breakout. Like if I was watching this every day, which I'm not, then you can see here the higher low. Look at the swing. So I've got my swing pro here. Low, higher low, higher low. This one increased volume, pushed the tops, did close under, but then the next bar, lower volume, which means there are less people selling. Next bar, lower volume again, but you're in between. So you hadn't broken highs, you hadn't broken lows. And then on this bar here, there's your breakout. But then you risk, you're getting in here above the highs at around $1. And the lows, you put your stops somewhere around 70 cents to somewhere around 55 cents, right? Underneath the previous swing bottoms. So you could still get out. Maybe it comes in and stops you all out, but at least you're in on the trend. So you got to be watching this thing every single day to find out where those next swing tops are getting formed in the market. So that's what it takes. Yeah,
to actually get good short-term entries on alts. See, there's a difference between a high time frame thesis being correct and executing in the short term optimally. Obviously, you're never going to get it exactly optimal, but you're right. It does take you actually looking at those day to day, like probably going on the 1 hour, 4 hour, and like monitoring something.
Yeah, you got some swing tops, so you can focus here on the 4 hour. I wouldn't go down to the 1 hour. I know lots of people do, but it's just getting a bit too granular. I think the 4 hour gives you enough.
That's my favorite time frame, the 4 hour or the daily. They're my two go-tos.
1 hour,
and
you
weekly
just like
for macro.
Yeah, exactly. You're just making life hard for yourself going on to the 1 hour. Most people are going to have jobs and shit to do. They're not going to be sitting there on a 1 hour chart. It's crazy.
You should speak to Paradise in the Discord. He's on the 15 minutes sometimes.
Yeah,
but these are for scalps, different style.
You turn on at a certain hour, get off at a certain hour, and you just do what you can in the you're on for 3 or 4 hours, 15-minute chart, okay. But yeah, if you're trying to do this long term on a 15-minute chart, it doesn't make sense.
That's generally how you want to enter a position as well. Go from weekly to daily to 4 hour to hour, and just like work down. And your entry is going to be on the lowest time frame, and then your general playbook is going to be on the higher time frame.
Scale out again.
Trading alts. I mean, we got CPI on Wednesday, then we have Trump's inauguration in a week, and then FOMC the week after. So it's going to be a crazy few weeks. I think
we got interest rates.
Yeah, interest rates. So
one other thing that I didn't bring up, but it's more of a macro thing. If they want to put it in, energies, you're seeing a lot of these start to really rip higher. So like maybe inflation coming back. Look at oil breaking through key levels. You got heating oil breaking through key levels.
That's why the 10-year is running so hard as well. If you look at the 10-year
with inflation
at the bonds, yeah.
It's
mostly in response to interest rates. It's in response to the hot economic data we're getting, which the market is interpreting
which chart in particular? Do you know the chart ticker?
I think it should just be 10-year 10. I don't actually know the ticker of what you're referencing. I would click the plus button and then try and search under the bond.
That's the ticker.
10. Yeah.
Oh, you just type in the name.
Treasuries, 10-year treasuries, US, yeah, US,
US 10-year.
yeah, exactly. So that's been running, obviously, because higher interest rates or less rate cuts would mean a stronger US dollar, right? So that's why you see the 10-year price upwards. Similar to your USDT dominance, this is like an inverse indicator. So the 10-year going up is bearish for risk assets, and the 10-year going down is bullish for risk assets because it indicates the strength of the dollar. And you don't want a strong dollar for risk assets, basically, is the summary of what it means for people.
Yeah, but what we're seeing in the face of that are energies and commodities going up because they're not necessarily risk assets, but typically you see them, it's an inverse correlation because the US dollar is strong and they sort of price accordingly, but you're seeing the US dollar strong and these commodities going up as well.
Because one's a bet on inflation and then one's a bet on the interest rate response to inflation, and both are good for
They're all going up.
Yeah, it's all going up at once, which is the reason fundamentally. And look, as you said, price follows news, vice versa. It can be interpreted differently, but fundamentally, that is the explanation for the dip or the fear right now in the stock market. It's, oh no, inflation's coming back, interest rates might actually, maybe the Fed won't be able to cut as much as they wanted to because the economy is actually not as weak as we thought. So maybe they're actually going to hike. So then everything just gets repriced in real time because they're looking 2 years ahead. So now it's like, oh, we're not getting 3 rate cuts. We're not getting 2. We're getting 1, and maybe we're getting none next year. Maybe they'll start raising. So like, there's all this.
I put that in my forecasts. Like I'm saying that we're going to get interest rate increases because stuff's going to just start running away to the upside. So they're going to have to hike it.
If that's your thesis, how's Bitcoin going to cope in that environment? Because isn't that kind of contradictory to the cycle theory?
Not exactly, because the prices are going up. So I think they'll keep going up, and that's why they'll come back to try to prevent them from going up to cool things off. So maybe it's like you said, that the environment is that they're watching all the prices run up, or people are pricing 2 years ahead, saying, well, interest rates aren't going to be getting cut as much as we thought. Shit, we better start to flip the other way. And so they'll start to watch everything run up. And then the things will still have to get increased. The interest rates will still have to get increased to try and curb how much they've started to inflate and how much it's started to go up as well.
Yeah, it's honestly fascinating. It's very hard to get an edge in that space because I've seen the best macro analysts in the world get it so wrong over the last couple of months. So I've kind of learned to not read too much into it because everyone's wrong, man. Like I swear.
Totally. When it comes to those
even the best analysts
piece them together, that's why I just keep going back to the chart. I'm like, well, that trend is obviously up. You can see a higher low form on top of, in this case, the 200-day moving average, and it's just pushed away higher again.
The charts tell you pretty much everything without you needing to know everything. But I think it's good to have a basic understanding of what's happening and what could happen. But reading so far into it is going to be dangerous because this will change in 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago, no one cared about this. Everyone was just, totally. Trump's in, it's bullish. Now, all of a sudden, oh no, inflation's an issue. Jerome Powell's going to ruin everything. Like, now it's a big problem again. And then in 3 weeks, there'll be another narrative. Trump will come out and he'll say something about tariffs, and that'll have the market excited or bearish. So it's like, it's constantly changing.
Yep, always.
And that's due to something that you pointed out, actually, on your Twitter, of because people are anticipating the end of the cycle, there's heightened volatility.
Yep.
So they're reacting more than maybe they normally would because they're like, okay, this might be the last year or within the last 2 years, depending on your range. So for that reason, we're going to react a lot more to this stuff, maybe more so than we would at the beginning of a bull. Because the beginning of the bull doesn't really matter, but now it's people are looking for signals.
Yeah, it's not known that the bull is beginning. That's the thing. Like in 2022, 2020 was the start of the second half of the real estate cycle. Sorry, 2020 was the start of the second half of the real estate cycle. We had the low, right? But just as a recent example, 2022, 2023, that was around the lows. Not as much money was in the markets. Now we're seeing more money come into the markets. There was quite a few different posts I put up there, money managers and cash and all that sort of stuff has come in. And so you get more fluctuation, which is exactly what I'd written there. Everyone's trying to keep picking this top because they're now exposed at the worst times. things can keep going up, but I just think it's going to get a bit more volatile. And the emotions obviously come into the volatility now.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a good place to end it. Thanks for coming.
Agreed. Yeah, thanks, mate. Always happy to be here and chat more about the macro space as best we can.
No, it's a good counterbalance because I'm so focused on alts and you're much more macro focused. So it's always nice to, consider both sides of things. I mean, it all goes hand in hand, but it's nice to like have a different perspective. And we actually have a similar perspective, but just the way that we execute is extremely different. But I think it's it just comes down to edge, as I just said. Like, what's your edge?
Exactly.
Really. But cool.
All right, much appreciated, man.
See you in the next one. Peace.